All right, welcome back to Day with Greg Michelson. I'm here with my good friend Thomas Dinsmore. We spent a long time working together at Data Robot, and he was our. Tell us what you did. You were our competitive, like you were the guy who came up with the battle cards at Data Robot to help us talk about competitors and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Awesome.
Jeremy gave me the title Director of Competitor Annihilation, but I guess I failed because all the competitors are still in business. So,
No annihilation was accomplished. That sounds very Jeremy-esque, to be honest. But tell us kind of how did you walk us through where you went after Data Robot and what you're up to these days.
I left Data Robot, I think, in December of 2021. I went to join Domino Data. It's funny. The reason I joined Domino, I mean, partly, look, I am now 72 years old. I worked until I was 70. And in the last 10 years of my career, virtually every opportunity I had came from networking. Right. And so I knew people at Domino and maybe I could have gone somewhere else, but I'd rather work with people I know. So,
That's fair.
so yeah, I knew some people at Domino, but also this funny thing. And I don't know if this is still true, but at the time in 2020, I looked at some opportunities where Data Robot had been competing with Domino, and Domino won every one of them. Right? Domino has a different orientation than Data Robot did, and again, my data may be a couple of years out of date at this point, so far as Data Robot's concerned. But Domino is a company that has literally enterprise scale data science customers, people with 500 data scientists,
Hmm.
very, very large scale customers. And they have a platform that scales up to it, but also where Data Robot focused on sort of efficiency, building our model faster, and that's important. Domino's, their stock and trade is governance. Right. In other words, the way Domino works is it's literally capturing everything that all of your work on the platform so you can reproduce it. All right. And that has a couple different benefits. One is if you're starting a new project and someone says, hey, that looks an awful lot like this other project we did, you go pull up the other project and you've got, all your assets, your project assets that are in front of you. But the other thing is if the auditors show up, you can show them exactly and there are 7 or 8 different aspects, kinds of assets that you generate when you're a data scientist. I mean, you have your code, you have your data, an actual snapshot of the data, as well as how you pulled the data. You have the actual models you created, you have the various production deployments of those models, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, there are a lot of different types of assets. And there's a lot of vendors that claim to offer reproducibility because they can do some of those things. But again, Domino's and the way Domino is able to compete against companies like Amazon or Google is two things. One is that they're able to deliver a better story for reproducibility, but there are also still an awful lot of enterprise scale data scientists that can't limit their work to a single platform. Right. So, and Domino has a hybrid platform, so you can literally be running, you can be building on Amazon and on Google and on your on-prem platform, and all of that is integrated into a single instance with visibility across all your projects. And so that's how they appeal. Now, again, I'm not here to sell Domino. I but that's why I went there from Data Robot. I mean, Data Robot was a fun company to work for. I love Jeremy. I love the company.
Yeah.
Um, Great people like yourself. All the data scientists that Data Robot attracted, just exceptional people. And one reason I left is that it struck me that the best people were leaving, and I think in any company, I left before the big scandal broke with
Did you really?
yeah,
With the stock selling and all that stuff?
yeah, and I bought my
Yeah.
stock at 15, right? And Yeah, so
Nice.
I now have and sitting in my safe deposit box, physical certificates of Data Robot shares, as far as I'm concerned, are worth nothing, which I
Well, they
paid.
are at this point. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and I got Data Robot will, they seem to be finding a new niche in the marketplace, but they have so much senior equity. There's $1 billion of senior equity in the company. Unless the company manages to sell out for more than $1 billion, all those common shares that we earned
Yeah.
are worth nothing. But
Yeah.
you never know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I left before all that hit the fan. In December 2021, and it was in, I think, June of 2022
Was
that
Jeremy still CEO when you left?
no.
Yeah.
So
I think I
Jeremy
lasted until October.
Jeremy
So
left
you,
in April of 2021. Yeah,
yeah,
it was 2021.
somewhere around
April
there. Yeah.
2021 he left.
Yeah.
And then the company kept on going. I left in December of 2021. At the time I had moved over to the product team, which was
Hmm.
great to work for. I mean, again, I have no beef with Data Robot as a company and as an employer, but I just wanted to go in new directions. And again, it seemed like a lot of the best people were starting to leave, and that's to me always a good sign that it's time to pack your bags. But then the article appeared in, was it The Intercept? One of those.
Information, I think.
Oh yeah, The Information. They
Yeah.
published the article in June of 2022.
Oh,
What's his name? The CEO left in September. Uh,
Dan. Yeah.
yeah, he was able to hang on for a couple months,
Yeah.
of scandal. Meanwhile, a lot of the members of the board quit. The entire audit committee quit. That
Yeah.
tells you.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But, by all indications, there's still a few people that were there when I was there that are still there, and, you know, there's
Yeah.
some.
Fair bit of turnover. Most of the executives have gone,
Yeah.
but hmm,
So, I mean, I think the company may have hit bottom and it's on the resurge, and at the last Gartner scored him as a leader, which they never did in during Jeremy's tenure. Of course, Jeremy hated Gartner and they hated Jeremy, so maybe there's a
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't have much left for Gartner either. It's all pay to play, that Gartner stuff. You write them a big enough check, they'll put you in whatever quadrant that you want.
I think it's a little bit more subtle than that. It's not like you show up with suit bags full of cash, but there is a built-in conservative bias because most of Gartner's clients are like big IT departments, right? And so there's a tendency to favor the more conservative companies. That's why IBM and SAS always score well on those things, right? But don't get me started on Gartner. Yeah, yeah, I'll just sound like an old man ranting. Uh,
Yeah.
in
It's a
fact,
necessary evil, maybe.
it's one of those things. And that's, I mean, I love Jeremy, but um, it's like, yeah, Gartner is just part of the game you have to play as a CEO, and you can't just thumb your nose at them um, because they have influence. And yeah, so all you can do really is suck it up, do your best, and try to spin it, or not participate at all, right? Which is, I think, the smarter move because it's easier to message around. We don't think our product doesn't fall into Gartner's predefined category than it is to say, well, we did our best, but we're still a niche player.
Yes. Yeah, that's fair. How do you think all this LLM Gen AI stuff has impacted the AutoML market that Data Robot used to play in or tries to play in?
Yeah. Well, Data Robot's singing the song of AI agents, and whenever I hear the word agents, I go to sleep. I mean, I just this old story. I've told this a million times, but back in 1996, Gartner was predicting that data warehouse agents would transform business. right? And what were they talking about? The data warehouse agents they were talking about were what we now know as stored procedures and table functions, right? So is there something in AI agents? Yeah, but it's like a buzzword for something for fairly specific technology that people will understand, and get some value out of. I was speaking to another CEO of a startup who I can't name, but he's in a category that you might say is similar to Data Robot. And his organization is using AI agents for feature engineering and feature generation. I would characterize it as proactive feature generation because the way they've set it up is your agents are going out there looking for data and finding ways to transform it before you build your model. And so and that's it. And does it work? I don't know. Right. Can they sell it? I don't know, right? But it sounds good. So yeah, but I get mixed signals from. I do try to keep in touch with people I know in the data science community, and I get mixed signals. I mean, one woman who was at Data Robot, who's now at a consulting firm, says pretty much all her work is in predictive analytics, and another one who was at Data Robot says all her team's work is generative AI. So I think it depends on where you are and what kind of company you're with. Generative AI is opening up new use cases for data scientists that didn't exist before. So, big brand companies that do a lot of marketing and advertising are using Gen AI to create backgrounds and images and text and content and all that.
Content.
And that's the kind of stuff, the marketing departments were like the last people to use data science the way we define it at Data Robot. But still, there's still money in predictive applications. So, you know, arguably there'll be a split. Now, I can think of, and again, I won't name names, but a data scientist that from Data Robot, top notch fellow. Now all he does is generative AI, and he's really good at it. But the thing is, he like when Google first published Transformers in what was that, 2017, 2018, he was all over it, right? So I mean, there are people who have been all over the incremental developments that led up to the explosion of generative AI all along. People, we used to call them text miners, right? Or they were computer vision specialists, right?
Right.
Well, and so they like understood that technology, and they're the people that have the most credibility with generative AI today.
Do you use these models much in your day to day? You
I
getting on
I use
ChatGPT?
Gemini. I use Gemini, and why do I use Gemini? It's not because I checked some leaderboard and they have the best. I use Gemini because it's embedded with Google
Within
Doc,
Google?
the Google Slides, which I use all the time. I
Mhm.
use Google Search, and for me, an important thing in any AI assistant is its ability to come up with sources, right? And in order to validate what it's saying, right? Because I find with Google Gemini all the time, it'll say some shit, and I'll say, "Whoops," or it'll
Yep.
say something, and uh, and I'll say, "No, that's not true. Show me your sources." And it goes out and it comes back, apologizes. I apologize. You're right. I couldn't. You say you have to push it, but yeah. So I use research when I write, and I recently finished like a 50,000 word book,
Mhm.
and
On what?
it's about my son,
Oh, I see.
and it's basically his biography. And I took the complete text, copied it into the Gemini window, and just said, "Please fact check this."
Mhm.
In other words, there are things you can do with AI assistants that you never could do. I never one of the things I don't do is I don't ever let Gemini write anything for me. I mean, to me, that's just
Cheating.
that's I'm not going to say unethical. I just think it's lame and but you can do things like you can like in this text. One of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to anonymize. I didn't want to have use people's real names, so I asked Gemini to read the entire 50,000 word text and give me a list of all the named people in there, right? It can do that, right? So then I go back in and but just basic fact checking.
Yeah.
I don't, again, there are things that it's so much easier to use Gemini to search for information than it is to use Google search.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You just dump text in there and have it do whatever it is that you want it to do.
Yeah. I'm being a retired person. I've spent a lot of time in the garden, and I worked with Gemini to create my plan for the coming season. It knows all the plants. It knows what their water requirements are, their sun requirements are, how fast they grow, how tall they grow, all that good stuff. It's a great tool. I like it.
It is surprising how often it apologizes for stuff, right? One of
Yeah,
the things so my in-laws own a bakery, and we help them with soup. So they like to serve soup. And so we'll ask for a recipe for, corn chowder,
yeah,
for 50, and it'll
yeah.
come up with a recipe, and we'll go, that seems like an awful lot of chicken broth for that corn chowder recipe. Are you sure that's the right amount? And it doesn't matter what amount. It's like, oh, you're right. This was wrong, kind of thing. It's very eager to please.
Yeah.
And so if you tell it it's wrong, it's going to completely agree with you. So have you noticed this?
Have, and we all understand that these things hallucinate, and thing is, so do traditional models, right? If you build a churn model or a risk model and you put in absurd inputs, it'll still give you a score. It's just the score is no good, right? You
Yeah,
have
that's
to
fair.
build into your application the ability to validate and filter the inputs that are going in. The difficulty with generative AI is that it's much more difficult to validate and filter the inputs that are going in and the outputs that are going out because it just by the nature of it. So yeah, I mean it's hard to please, and the thing is, you have to wonder. It's like if it's so easy to give me wrong information, how can I trust it? The answer is no, you can't trust it. All right, don't. We're trust but verify. Uh,
Now, I have the feeling that we are in, um, let's see. So I was reading a book the other day, or an article about the way physics has proceeded, like how innovation in physics has happened over the last, say, 40 or 50 years. And the point of this article was that we were in a blind alley, that we went down and we made some progress in terms of like understanding the nature of the universe and so on. But somewhere along the way, a bad choice has been made and it's led to a dead end. And that's why there hasn't been any real innovation in the last, few decades in physics. I have the same feeling that that's what's happened in the Gen AI space, that we've got these models that are really good chatbots and that can do some pretty impressive tricks, but that there's no way to go from here to like AGI, to like real artificial intelligence, without like backtracking and changing some of those bad decisions along the way. Do you think that that's true, or do you think that we're on the right track, or how do you see this particular innovation in the broader context of like trying to get to our machine overlords?
Anytime anyone mentions AGI, I go to sleep. It's just like with agents, right? I have a very simple attitude towards generative AI. I like it. I use it. It's that simple. I mean, and to me, generative AI is just remarkable. I mean, it's just remarkable that we can do this. Um, yeah, I know there are people out there, Gary Marcus, but my opinion is Gary Marcus was the guy that watched the Wright brothers fly their plane and went out and put all his money in Zeppelins, right? And I mean, all these people that say that are screaming that we'll never get to AGI. It's like, who cares, right? It's like we're not going to get. Are we going to get to autonomous cars? Well, my car that I bought 2 years ago has all kinds of cool features that it didn't have that the previous car didn't have, all of which are related to. In other words, there's safety. It detects things, and it in other words, there are things that we've developed on the way to autonomous driving that are actually benefiting cars today. All right, are we ever going to get to AGI? Well, who cares? It's a little bit like my father used to say, "Nobody cares about getting to the moon, but at least we got Teflon," right? Yeah, I mean, a lot of times the main value of first of all, everybody has to have a goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if and if for some people the goal is AGI, okay, that's fine, whatever works for you, right? But a lot of the benefits don't come from meeting the goal. The benefits come from what you learned and developed along the way. Yeah, I mean, I could probably go at length about that, but I won't. Uh,
No, I like the Teflon example. Certainly, uh, a recipe generator like like ChatGPT is a really interesting sort of like byproduct of the pursuit of building real artificial intelligence. It's fascinating.
but if ChatGPT generated recipes, it would be like, I don't know, liver cake, or things that there are a lot of sort of constraints and boundaries on the way we think that we actually value. All right. Like, liver is actually good for you. I don't know. I'm not going to eat it. Right. 'Cause um, yeah, yeah. So, um, again, I'm just incredibly impressed with generative AI as it is. Yeah, I know I keep hearing about risks, all that the controversy Grok created with undressing people and all that sort of stuff, which took them, I think, a week to fix. Um, if they, I mean, again, I
Wait,
never.
I didn't hear about that. What happened with Grok?
Well, Grok introduced a feature where you could upload a photo and Grok would return a photo of that same photo undressed.
Wow, like a
Yeah.
packaged feature doc.
Well,
That seems like a profoundly bad idea.
how that could be abused, right?
Hmm.
And I've seen people make claims that this was like hugely awful, and yeah, I don't think I would wanna have a picture of myself published undressed. Um, but that said, I also know that Grok pretty quickly fixed that, right? So now if you upload a picture first of all, if you say, you know, undress this person, Grok will say no, right? But they'll take a picture of Keir Starmer, the prime minister, and put him in a bikini, right? In other words, it will do certain things, and is it? So in general, is there potential abuse? Of course there is. I mean, I remember couple years ago, I mean, chatting with some people on LinkedIn, arguing that as with every other innovation, the most profitable uses for generative AI will be war, fraud, and porn, right? And like OnlyFans is one of the successful startups in Silicon Valley. I mean, so and they're not even using Gen AI, but
Or are they?
I mean, it may sound cynical, but the history of science is largely the history of war, and and it's like, why did we invent the integral calculus? To aim cannon, right? Right. Darwin's expedition on the Beagle was sent by the Royal Navy to find coaling stations. All right, he was just cargo, but
Do you think that we have? I don't. I don't think we've really figured out what our rights are yet, or what rights should be in terms of like, is it is it is it just a bad idea for this like undressing application that you talked about, or does that violate some sort of like human right that people should or do have? Uh,
I'm not a lawyer. I mean, I think most people would agree that an application that takes a picture of you fully clothed and then recreates it of you totally naked is problematic, right? Is it
but I mean,
technically?
we've had the capability of like putting your head on somebody else's body for a long time.
Yeah,
Like that
right.
that
And
exists.
Yeah, and if you publish that, I think you are potentially at legal risk, not necessarily of a crime or but as of a civil tort, right? In other words, if you take a picture of somebody you work with and, put that person's head on a naked body and then publish it and you damage their reputation, that's a lawsuit that I would happily invest in. Uh, but again, I'm not a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It
and
doesn't have to be just like, porn type stuff. It could be putting words in somebody's mouth,
right,
or, something like that. Those are all things that are very easy to do these days.
there was a case in New Hampshire where it was right around the time of the Democratic primary in 2024, right? So it was while President Biden was still considered a candidate, and somebody put out a video of it showed Biden talking and saying, "Don't bother to vote in the primary because I'm running, and there's no need for you to vote." In other words, it was, and suppose it was like a voter suppression thing, and that actually went to trial, and the person was acquitted, and the reason they were acquitted was it was a technical aspect of it. It had to do with the fact that I think technically they published it after the voting had closed, so it wasn't
Mm.
again, I don't remember the details of it, but again, I know the person was acquitted. It was a case of faking somebody's faking President Biden saying something,
Mhm.
and anyone could do that. I mean, there's some disincentives to do that among, in other words, if you're doing a political ad, um, I would think that people can pretty quickly smoke out those fakes, right? In other words, if you're running for office and someone publishes a video of you saying, that something really outrageous, well, the moment you come out and say, "I didn't say that," all right, that's in another. The moment you deny it, all right. Fact is that there are probably going to be some people out there that won't believe your denial, right?
Right.
But it's usually generally possible to figure out if something has been faked. For example, I don't know about it with images. I know that with text, there's very good AI detectors. You can
Are
drop,
there though?
yeah.
Hmm. Now I've seen actors like actors and writers and comedians and so on being up in arms about what AI can do and how it's sort of like uh well, I mean, has the potential to kind of replace that whole industry in a pretty significant way. You see that happening?
Well, let's take, I don't know, George Clooney. I mean, George Clooney has a property right in his image. In other words, if somebody uses AI to clone George Clooney and then make a movie
George
without
Clooney.
hiring George Clooney can sue them, into oblivion. Um, that's certainly true for famous people. A lot of the concern, I think, comes from more like bloggers, right? Just sort of people that aren't famous. I mean, there is a. I mean, you automatically have a copyright in anything you create. You don't, and in other words, anything you write, you have a copyright. But one of the, so let's say Chat GPT, let's say OpenAI trains its models on the text you wrote. Question is, does OpenAI now owe you a royalty? Um, it's not been settled because OpenAI will claim that under copyright law, there is a doctrine of fair use, right? It's like, if you write a book, I can quote some of it and say, or I could write a satire about it, all right, and I don't need your
Or
permission.
I can learn from it and generate more content of my own based on it.
Well, there are limits to the fair use doctrine, but there is under U.S. law, it doesn't apply it doesn't apply in England, I don't think, and it doesn't apply in Europe. But under U.S. law, the fair and the U.K. and Europe have a different version of a fairness doctrine,
Hmm.
and they don't call it that. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but in the U.S., the fairness doctrine has limits, but it's all to be limited. And I believe there is a court case between the New York Times and OpenAI, and how are the courts going to come down? I don't know. I mean, they could rule in favor of OpenAI. They could rule in favor of the New York Times. I think in some cases, um, there are folks that argue that OpenAI didn't just violate their copyright, but they violated their terms of service. Because like
No web scraping.
this is hypothetical. I'm not saying this happened, but the argument is that one person at OpenAI might have a subscription to the New York Times, and using that, he now has access to the New York Times. He then trains a model on. I'm not saying that happened, right? I think I've heard people argue that, but that would be not a violation of copyright. It would be a violation of terms of service. I don't know. I mean, these things will get up to the Supreme Court and they'll be settled, but they won't be settled for years. And yeah.
And in the
I,
meantime, millions of pages of copy are getting generated by ChatGPT every day, and the
yeah,
internet is becoming more and more dead than it ever has been.
but many of the concerns, for example, I have a blog, right? I never charge anything for people to read it or use it. If ChatGPT trains its model on my blog, I don't, I haven't suffered any damages, right? I haven't, and you could even make an argument that, particularly to the extent that AI assistants link back to sources, that having an AI model train on your content might actually help you, right? In other words, you may get more people linking back to it. But that's the thing. In other words, if people are making a living off their content, and there are issues, and again, I'm not absolving any of the AI vendors of responsibility here. I'm just saying it's a matter that's going to be settled in the courts, and it's hard to predict how it will go.
Hmm. But I mean, the courts only have jurisdiction over the places where those courts are, right? So the U.S. Supreme Court only governs the U.S. and
Right, and
the EU only governs the EU, and
again,
so
there's
on.
different law governing content in other countries, and yeah, so
But yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, this is kind of a worldwide phenomenon, yeah. So it's not super clear how an individual country can govern that sort of stuff when it's worldwide.
well, if I'm OpenAI, which I'm not, but if I
Mm,
were, as with any multinational company, I need to have an understanding of the laws of every country where I operate, and that means that uh, I don't know if it's still true, but for a while, ChatGPT wasn't available in Europe at all. I mean, is it
mm,
now? I don't know. Right, but the point being is that the capabilities you deliver and the level, it affects both your training, right? What copy is fair game for training? It might be
mm.
different in one country than it is in another country, but also what can you show, what can you deliver? That has to be country specific, and that's true. It's like it doesn't, it's true in software. If you're marketing software, you have to market one way in Brazil and a different way in Chile, and it's not
Yeah, but
Matt.
I mean, if you have 200 million users or however many million users that OpenAI has, the people will demand what the people want. You know what I mean? So maybe OpenAI has to, like, worst case scenario, the courts say, hey, you can't do that. They relocate the company to Bermuda, and then they've still got, they're still worth $100 trillion or whatever the number is, and they're still developing, this software that everyone on the planet uses.
Well, I'm just going to make a hypothetical. Let's suppose a country says that you cannot use generative AI to create pictures of animals. Let's just say, all right, you know, because animals are sacred in this country, or a particular kind of animal, right?
Sure,
So if
sure.
you're a multinational AI vendor, you're either going to have to create an exception. In other words, a different instance of your software and your service that you serve up to users in that country, or
Mhm.
if it's big enough, you might just apply that same rule globally. I mean, one of the um, uh, one of the phenomena in the U.S. textbook market, like for school textbooks, is that California and Texas have centralized purchasing of textbooks. So if you're a textbook publisher, whatever California and Texas want, you're gonna roll out nationwide. It doesn't matter that in Massachusetts every town picks its own textbook, right? You're
Sure.
not going to tailor your publication to what they want in Lexington, Massachusetts. You're going to tailor it to the standards of so if the customers are big enough, then yeah, they can have the influence, which to be I mean, not to diss anyone else, but the United States market is still the biggest market for any of these AI suppliers, and so the U.S. market rules. But we are seeing right now, for example, with in the UK Digital Services Act, right? The UK is trying to shut down some US websites that and again, what they can do is they can seize any assets that those companies have in the UK, but these are companies that have no assets in the UK, right? And so that attempt to regulate will likely be futile,
Mhm.
because again, the UK can say we don't like what you publish on your websites, and they can try to block that in the UK, but they can't go to the US and say you have to shut down that website.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. It feels to me like the regulators in this case are playing from a position of weakness where the people want what the people want, and there's not really a lot that they can do about it.
Yeah, I suppose that's right.
Hmm. Wild.
Anyway,
Well, what's the next big thing for Mr. Dinsmore? What do you got on the horizon?
well, I'm working on last year I started working on a history of AutoML, and I got a certain point to it, and I don't know, I kind of lost interest. Not that it's an uninteresting topic, but to be honest, I'm more interested in the current and the future. So I've been doing some revisions to that recently. I hope to publish something soon, and I haven't decided whether I might just abandon the history and just do a current state of AutoML. One of the challenges that I'm grappling with is, I mean, AutoML really isn't a category anymore. It's more of a feature, and
Mhm.
do I want to write about AutoML, a feature, or do I want to write more broadly about? Yeah, I'm principally interested in. I mean, some people call it data science, some people call it predictive analytics, right? I'm interested in that process of building useful models for enterprises, right? You know, credit score, churn models, whatever, right? That whole process. And I'm interested in platforms that make that more efficient, more effective, et cetera, et cetera. And
Mhm.
what do you call that? Is it automated machine learning? Is it automated data science? Is it automated predictive analytics? Is it something else? I haven't decided. I will decide. I have to before I can publish anything. But I want to sort of summarize the current state of commercial and open source offerings. That's probably one post right there.
Mhm.
That's
Does it seem to you that that things like Claude Code or ChatGPT or Zerv or whatever are sort of making automated machine learning or automated anything really sort of obsolete? So if I can generate code at will that does exactly what I want, do I need an automated process?
Well, yeah, I think the answer is yes and no. right? In other words, you can go to ChatGPT and say, write the Python code for a churn model, and it'll write you the Python code for a churn model. Is that code any good? Well, how do you know? You have to test it, right? And if you think about what Data Robot did or H2O does, they run experiments. So can you say to ChatGPT, you know, give me the best churn model given my data? Um, it's possible that, in the same sense that a million monkeys typing at random will eventually write poetry, I mean, ChatGPT might be able to produce that. But it's more likely that what you need is some application that sort of manages the process and prompts a large language model for the code for the experiments. Right. In other words, write an experiment, run it, evaluate it, and then write a new prompt, right? That is more precise, that yields another you so and but is it going to be AI that manages that process, or is it going to be some application that people? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that exists today, but it's I know what people are talking about when they talk about AI agents. Um, yeah, uh, but I don't want to give away too much of what I'm thinking about writing. But I'm a little skeptical of the notion that ChatGPT is just going to replace all your data scientists. Um,
Mm,
Partly because, for the same reason, ChatGPT isn't going to replace all your doctors, which is that people go to doctors because they trust doctors. And whereas it makes perfect sense for the doctors to use ChatGPT or some variation of
sure.
ChatGPT, for the same problem exists in business, right? In other words, the chief executive doesn't know that this model's any good, right? She relies on the chief data scientist who tells her this is a good model. Well, how does the chief data scientist know? Well, it's not because the chief data scientist thinks ChatGPT writes good models, right? It's because the chief data scientist either knows how to prompt ChatGPT or because there's some process of testing and measurement and so forth. So, does that
Mm.
answer your question? I mean, yes and
Yeah,
no.
it does. I mean, it seems to me that there's an awful lot of stuff that's being created that is mainly useless. Like like a feature store or like weights and biases. Like I feel like there's a lot of products out there that are sort of solutions in search of a problem. And the stuff that's going to win is going to be the stuff that people actually use. And
Yeah.
it seems to me that most machine learning is, like anytime anybody talks about machine learning, they go, oh, like customer churn. It's like an example of a problem that is either too simplistic or not relevant for most
Well,
organizations out there.
I would disagree about the two vendors you named because, well, Feature Store, well, Tecton is now Databricks, I think, but it actually makes some sense if you're a data scientist that rather than redefining a feature every time you write a model to define it once, lock it down, and then you reuse it. That makes good sense, right? I mean,
It seems to. I mean, certainly the idea has caught on, but is anybody actually using it? I don't know.
well, Tecton, the Databricks gave them a bit of money for. Is anyone using it? I think the answer is yes. Tecton had a
Okay.
deep footprint of customers. Weights and biases. I mean, nobody from Data Robot should throw shade at weights and biases. They sold out. They
Yeah.
cashed. Data Robot didn't.
Yeah. No question about that.
And weights and bias perfectly exemplifies the market today in the sense that those guys were all over generative AI before generative AI was a thing, right? In other words, OpenAI was a customer of weights and biases, and so they kind of understood that long
Mm,
before. It's like when ChatGPT launched, you can actually see this if you go back in the Wayback Machine. You look at different vendor websites. Companies that have never heard of generative AI suddenly are like, we're the generative AI vendor, right? But that wasn't true. Weights and Biases understood that stuff a long time ago. Yeah. But
Mm,
anyway, they're doing fine
yeah,
now. Who
yeah,
bought up
yeah.
Riverstown?
Core Logic? Core,
Right, right. Yeah.
right?
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah, those
yeah.
guys are all doing fine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're doing fine, but I mean, how much money somebody makes and the actual real usefulness of their product is not always perfectly correlated.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Uh, yeah, I mean, supposedly we're entering a trough of disillusionment for generative AI. I don't know. Could be.
I'm not the least bit disillusioned. Are you?
Not either. Right. But yeah, I mean, the key question is, can anyone make money from it? And I don't mean Nvidia. Of course, Nvidia is making money. When there's a gold rush, sell shovels.
Yeah.
But the question that people are trying to figure out in business, like if you're a bank, does Gen AI help you make money? And my gut feel is yes, but it takes time to figure that out.
Hmm.
I published this study where they're saying, "Oh, this Gen AI stuff is nonsense. Nobody's making any money. I mean, the ROI on these generative AI projects is nothing." And I worked with IT organizations a long time. I never, ever knew any IT organization to measure ROI on anything. Right? If you had to measure ROI on data warehouses, they never would have built any of them. Right?
Hmm.
So I, I I'm a little skeptical about the people that are saying, "Oh, there's no money in this stuff," because yeah, I mean, there's some obvious opportunities to make money with generative AI, and we're just beginning to discover them. Anyway,
Yeah, like what's the ROI on Google Docs, right? How do you even start to calculate it?
yeah,
But
good question.
can you operate without a word processor? No, you absolutely can't.
Yeah, I mean, I know it. I mean, Google's just. I mean, they're harvesting everything I write. So I mean, what's the ROI on them putting out a free word processor? Well,
Pretty high. I mean, they completely murdered Microsoft Office.
yeah. Anyway, I've got to run in a minute or two.
Yeah, no, it was great talking to you. I
Yeah,
really
big,
appreciate you
really
jumping on.
great.
It's always
Anything
nice to.
else on that's top of mind for you?
No, no, just great to catch up and get your thoughts on the things that are happening these days.
Cool. And I didn't have a chance to ask you what you're doing with Zerv, so maybe another session.
Yeah, you'll have to jump on. I'd love to hear your competitive thoughts on the AI
Okay.
coding environments that are out there for data science.
All right, sir. Well,
Cool.
a
All right,
pleasure
Thomas.
to
Thanks.
see you
Really
again.
appreciate it. Great
Well,
seeing you.
all right. Bye.
Bye.